The young lawyer who asked that question in the 1950s was not yet the grey-haired symbol of justice the world would come to adore. He was restless, quick-witted, sometimes stubborn to the point of exasperation. His friends called him Madiba, the clan name that tied him to a long ancestry of Xhosa chiefs. But the world would know him as Nelson Mandela. Mandela's story began in the rolling hills of Mvezo, a small village in South Africa, where he was born in 1918. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakanyiswa, was a local chief, stern but respected, who taught his son the customs of the Thembu people. Mandela recalled sitting by the fire at night, listening to tales of warriors and ancestral battles, the sparks floating into the sky like stars being born. One evening, his father placed a hand on his son's shoulder and said, "Remember, Madiba, courage is not the absence of fear. It is the triumph over it." The boy nodded, not yet knowing how prophetic those words would become. When his father died, young Nelson was taken under the guardianship of Chief Jongintaba at the Thembu Royal Court. There, he was treated both as family and as a student of leadership. He wore hand-me-down jackets, too big for his shoulders, and sat cross-legged at council meetings, absorbing lessons about fairness and compromise. He learned that leadership was not about shouting the loudest, but listening the longest. Once, during a heated discussion, Jongintaba silenced the crowd by lifting his staff. He asked Mandela, still only a teenager, what he thought. Surprised, Mandela stammered, I think a leader should be the last to speak." The chief smiled. "Exactly. Remember that but Mandela was also mischievous. He loved running barefoot across the fields, racing his friends until they collapsed in the grass. He teased them, calling himself a gazelle with a lawyer's tongue. Humour clung to him, a tool he would one day wield even in the darkest cells. At Fort Hare University, Mandela got his first taste of rebellion. He was meant to become a polished civil servant, but when the Student Council imposed unfair rules, Mandela joined a boycott. The school expelled him. His guardian was furious. "You shame the family," Jongintaba thundered. Mandela, barely 20, straightened his back and replied quietly, "I would shame myself more if I stayed silent." Fleeing an arranged marriage, Mandela escaped to Johannesburg, a city buzzing with gold mines, shanty towns, and a racial system sharpening its claws. He worked as a guard at a mine, then as a clerk, before finally enrolling in law school. In a small, dusty office with peeling paint, Mandela and his friend Oliver Tambo opened South Africa's first black law firm. Poor workers lined up outside their door, domestic servants fired without pay, miners beaten for demanding safety, families evicted overnight. Mandela sat with them, listening, his tie slightly crooked, scribbling notes furiously. "The law must serve the people," he told Tambo one evening, exhaustion in his eyes. Tambo smiled. "Madiba, you argue like a preacher, but you charge like a lawyer. That combination may save this country." By the late 1940s, apartheid had hardened into official policy. Black South Africans stripped of rights, segregated, their lives controlled by white minority rule. Mandela joined the African National Congress, ANC, rising quickly in its youth league. He cut a striking figure, tall, athletic, with a booming laugh that disarmed strangers. At rallies he shouted, "We are not asking for freedom. We are demanding it." The crowds roared, stamping their feet until the earth shook. His activism made him a target. Police followed him, raided his office, tapped his phone. Once, after a long meeting, a young comrade teased, "Nelson, you always wear those sharp suits. You think you're a politician or a fashion model?" Mandela grinned. "Why not both? If they want to call us savages, let us fight them in silk ties." But the state's brutality escalated. Peaceful protesters were beaten. And in 1960, the Sharperville massacre left 69 unarmed demonstrators dead. Mandela's faith in non-violent resistance cracked. In secret meetings, he and his comrades formed Umkhonto we Sizwe, the Spear of the Nation, an armed wing prepared for sabotage. We cannot win by stones against bullets, Mandela argued, but we can show them we will not kneel. In 1962, he was captured, accused of leaving the country illegally. During the infamous Rivonia trial of 1964, Mandela stood in the dock, tall and calm in a dark suit. The courtroom buzzed with journalists, policemen, and officials who expected him to beg for mercy. Instead, he delivered words that would echo across the globe. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal for which I hope to live. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Robben Island, off Cape Town, became his new world. The prison was a place of salt winds, seagull cries, and crushing monotony. Mandela was given a pickaxe and ordered to break rocks under the blazing sun. The warders sneered. "You think you're a leader? Now you're just another number." Mandela bent his back and struck the stone. In the evenings, he and other prisoners huddled in their cells, trading scraps of news smuggled in on cigarette paper. Yet even in prison, Mandela found humour. When guards ordered him to cut seaweed off the rocks, he joked, finally, I can add farmer to my resume." His comrades chuckled, the sound bouncing off the concrete walls like defiance. He taught fellow prisoners law, history, and discipline. "We must use this prison as our university," he said. When younger inmates grew restless, Mandela reminded them, patience is not submission. It is preparation. He wrote secret letters, kept his body fit, and never let bitterness rot his spirit. His smile, even behind bars, unnerved his captors. Decades passed. Outside, the world changed. International campaigns called for his release. Musicians sang, "Free Nelson Mandela." Sanctions tightened around South Africa. The apartheid regime, once arrogant, now staggered. In 1990, after 27 years, Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison. Millions watched live on television as he raised a clenched fist, his hair grey, his posture regal. Journalists shoved microphones toward him. Mandela's first words were steady. "I stand here before you, not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people." Negotiations with the white government were tense. Some ANC members demanded vengeance. Right-wing extremists plotted violence. But Mandela insisted on reconciliation. At a rally, when angry youths chanted for blood, he raised his hands. "Do not burn the future to avenge the past," he said. "Our weapon is unity." In 1994, South Africa held its first democratic election. People stood in lines miles long, some barefoot, some elderly, waiting hours just to cast a vote for the first time. When Mandela, now 75, walked into the polling station, an old woman wept openly. "I never thought I would live to see this," she said, clutching his arm. Mandela smiled gently. "Neither did I, Mama." Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president. The inauguration was attended by kings, presidents, and ordinary citizens. He wore a bright shirt instead of a stiff suit, standing on the steps of the Union buildings as jets flew overhead. "Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will experience the oppression of one by another," he declared. As president, he created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, allowing victims and perpetrators of apartheid crimes to speak openly. Some criticised him for being too forgiving. "How can you embrace your jailers?" a journalist asked. Mandela replied, "Because if I do not, then I remain their prisoner still." He loved small jokes, even in high office. Once, when Queen Elizabeth II visited South Africa, Mandela greeted her with, "Hello, Elizabeth. How's the Duke?" She laughed, unoffended, charmed by the warmth. He insisted on wearing colourful patterned shirts, defying the stiff image of statesmanship. "I cannot spend my life in suits," he quipped. "I spent enough years in uniforms." Mandela stepped down after one term, honouring his promise. "I have done my duty," he told the nation. "Let others carry the torch." He devoted his later years to fighting HIV/AIDS and supporting children's charities. When he died in 2013 at age 95, the world mourned. Crowds sang and danced in South Africa, celebrating his life as much as grieving his loss. Leaders from every corner of the globe paid tribute. Barack Obama said, "He no longer belongs to us. He belongs to the ages Mandela's journey, from a barefoot boy in the hills of Mveso, to a rebel branded a terrorist, to a prisoner breaking rocks, to a president healing a wounded nation, remains one of the most extraordinary arcs of the human spirit." He showed that courage is not about the absence of fear, but about walking forward despite it. For today's reader, his message is clear. You may be born into injustice. You may face walls higher than you can see, but you can choose dignity over despair, humour over hatred, patience over rage. And in doing so, you can turn even a prison cell into a classroom, and even a life of suffering into a beacon for humanity. Mandela once said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." His life proved that impossible is just a word waiting to be redefined.